році в Вільнюсі, народ наш відразу дав відсіч. Дуже багато країн довгий час живуть без війни, вони знаходяться в такому, знаєте, в задоволеному стані, і це дуже-дуже небезпечна річ.
Дякую, пан Данілов. Ну, на жаль, просто ми стислі в часі, не можемо довго продовжувати дискусію, бо є ще низка запитань. І тоді передаю слово міністру закордонних справ України пану Дмитру Кулебі. Скажіть, будь ласка, от ви безпосередньо стикаєтеся, напевно, з цією протидією з боку Росії, ви спілкуючись на міжнародній арені, напевно, бачите, які наративи Росія використовує, і найголовніше, а що Україна може з цим взагалі вдіяти? Яка ваша думка?
Дякую. Ну, треба віддати належне. Росія воює чітко по підручнику, і фізично на фронті, і в інформаційному полі. І цей підручник написаний 2000 років тому в Китаї Сунь-Дзы «Мистецтво війни». Сунь-Дзы, зокрема, казав, що щоб перемогти, ти маєш залишатися об'єднаним, об'єднувати всі свої сили. І, відповідно, ти маєш максимально роз'єднувати ворога. Це те, що відбувається. Головна мета російських наративів зараз – це роз'єднати Україну зсередини, посіяти внутрішні конфлікти і роз'єднати Україну з союзниками. Звідси береться такий наратив, наприклад, як втома від України. Це чиста мета там одна – роз'єднати Україну і союзників. Наратив слабенько злітає, тому що з одного боку, і, на жаль, медіа та різні експерти підіграють ці історії, бо це такий клікбейтний заголовок. Люди одразу хочуть подивитися, послухати. Але з одного боку говорять про втому від України, а з іншого боку оголошуються нові пакети оборонної підтримки, підписуються угоди про безпекове співробітництво, готується низка дуже великих рішень ще, які посилять підтримку України. Тому, взагалі, цей аргумент про втому від України, я його вперше почув на другому курсі інституту в 1999 році. І під нього просто різні теми підганяють, але він ніяк не спрацює, ніяк світ не втомиться від України. Тому головне просто, щоб розумні і нерозумні люди, які мають доступ до публічних каналів комунікації, не розганяли цю історію. Тому перший наратив, який просуває Росія, це ця втома. Ну, а другий, це спрямовано на зовнішнє роз'єднання, а ключовою історією, яку будуть розганяти росіяни для внутрішнього роз'єднання, це тема виборів в Україні. Ми вже бачимо їхні зусилля. І, до речі, це працює, цю історію вони намагаються розігнати і на міжнародному рівні, щоб ті політичні сили, яких згадав Олексій Мячеславович, є зараз головними носіями аргументу про те, що Україна не є демократичною країною, тому що не проводить вибори. Це теж історія, з якою треба дуже обережно, але рішуче, правильно, грамотно працювати, тому що росіяни будуть далі це розкачувати. Те, що відбувається в Польщі, очевидний російський слід, і теж мета дуже проста – зіграти на ситуації, щоб розколоти. Тому, як протидіяти? Перше – зберігати єдність всередині країни із союзниками. Вчора те, що було в Києві, візити, рішення – це і є якраз той цемент єдності. Друге – потрібно щодня працювати на результат. Коли щодня буде надходити в Україну зброя, коли будуть ухвалюватися санкційні пакети, будуть заморожені активи передані, Україні можу продовжити цей список. Коли кожного дня будуть рішення, ці рішення вибиватимуть опору з-під Росії. І ми над цими рішеннями працюємо, ми ці рішення отримуємо, ви всі їх бачите в новинах. Ми абсолютно здатні перемогти Росію, і їй не вдалося нас знищити і не вдасться, але треба залишатися об'єднаними. Дякую.
Дуже дякую. Тоді якраз можемо обсудити це питання, цей наратив з паном Василем Васильовичем Малюком, головою СБУ. Це стосується, напевно, більше якоїсь внутрішньої деморалізації. Росія також на це спрямовує певні зусилля. Це саме оці кампанії з дезінформації, з якими, напевно, СБУ також стикається. Можете ви зазначити, які зараз основні наративи і наскільки Україна взагалі здатна цьому протистояти?
Доброго дня, шановні колеги. Це лише один з напрямків нашої діяльності, те, за що ви кажете. Тому я на ньому окремо зупинюся, щоб не виривати з контексту всього того, що наразі робить Служба безпеки України. Я буду максимально короткий і лаконічний, з врахуванням того, що у нас не так багато часу. Ви маєте зрозуміти, що вже 2 роки триває війна і, по суті, в самих найгарячіших локаціях працюють наші співробітники. І сьогодні це не просто там виконання задачі чи функціональний обов'язок. По суті, це велика наша місія і наша справжня історична відповідальність. Служба безпеки України сьогодні працює і в повітрі, і в морі, і на лінії фронту, і в тилу ворога на тимчасово окупованих територіях, і в тилу ворога на території Російської Федерації. Коротко зупинюсь на окремих напрямках, почну з морського компоненту. Це була надважлива задача Верховного Головнокомандувача, було також відповідне рішення Ставки, тому нами було створено декілька цікавих нових розробок, а саме 2 надводних дрони. Один з них Sea Baby, це наш флагман, по суті, це багатоцільова платформа, і наразі ми її використовуємо не лише в режимі камікадзе, а й для дистанційного мінування і для інших заходів, але знову ж таки не буду забігати вперед і розкривати наших задумів ворогу. Ну і морський надводний дрон типу Мамай. Відповідні відпрацювання за допомогою Sea Baby – це 11 ворожих кораблів, і частина з них фактично ушкоджені безповоротно, частина з них перебуває на ремонті в російських доках і ще там не за 1, не за 2 роки зможе повернутися до того, щоб вийти в море. Також за допомогою цих дронів ми успішно вразили Кримський міст. Відбулося це 28 липня минулого року. По суті, спрацювали по залізнодорожньому сполученню і автомобільному сполученню. Ви маєте розуміти, що Кримський міст, він не відновлений ворогом повноцінно і наразі він не використовується для логістики ворожої, а саме для переміщення зброї, засобів ураження, тобто їх БК. Це все вони тянуть за рахунок паромних переправ. Проте, якщо ми говоримо за міст, то ми маємо зупинитись на тому, що вперше його ми вразили ще 8 жовтня 2022 року, а саме на наступний день після 70-річчя бункерного діда Путлера, коли вранці йому боліла голова, всі ви пам'ятаєте той ранок, коли успішне вогневе враження, а саме 21 тонна в тротиловому еквіваленті. На той час ми зайшли з суші, операцією займався я особисто і ще моїх 2 надійних побратима. Окрім роботи в морі, ми ефективно працюємо в повітрі. Сьогодні багато дуже в нас відповідних трофеїв і, по суті, робота повітряними БПЛА, вона розділена на декілька зон. Зокрема, це лінія фронту і 20 кілометрів вглиб ворога, 20 кілометрів 40, від 40 до 120 і 120 кілометрів плюс. Всі ви є свідками того, скільки військових об'єктів вражено, комплекси ПВО, навіть їх аналогів нет «Тріумф», велике ПВО, вартість якого $200, навіть цю систему ПВО ми успішно вразили. Якщо ми глянемо навіть крайніх 2 місяці, скільки нафтопереробних потужностей ворожих були успішно вражені. По суті, на 1/3 ми скоротили експорт нафтопродуктів, а 55% їх військового бюджету – це і є валютна виручка від експорту нафтопродуктів, і це цілком законні наші цілі. Якщо ми говоримо безпосередньо про роботу на лінії фронту, то результати кажуть самі за себе. Лише за минулий рік 516 танків. Це повне знищення, все з відеопідтвердженнями. Я не беру до уваги пошкодження. Окрім цього, реби, інші бронемашини, багато всього іншого. Ну і не буду зупинятись, зрозуміло, жива сила нашого супротивника. Над цим працює Центр спеціальних операцій, Альфа, Департамент військової контррозвідка, ДКІП, а також всі наші інші підрозділи. Проте не буду затримуватись на мілітарному компоненті. Всі знають, що серцем вітчизняної спецслужби є контррозвідка, і ми перейдемо до контррозвідки. 47 агентурних мереж виявлено і затримано минулого року. Понад 2000 держзрадників запідозрено, затримано з початку війни. І понад 5000 колаборантів. 47 агентурних мереж. Для вашого розуміння, це, знаєте, можна сказати, це справжні гадюшники на тілі неньки України. Це негідники, які працювали на ворога. І сьогодні ми ми вицілюємо не одноосібних держзрадників, а використовуємо складний досвід, отриманий нами в боротьбі з організованою злочинністю. Я вам наведу декілька прикладів. Як група молодиків, 3 чоловік, мешканці Чернігівської і Київської області, готували вогневе враження нашого ПВО «Петріот». Вони були затримані безпосередньо перед виконанням цих задач, коли вже монтували ударні БПЛА. До цього по задачі ФСБ вони пройшли відповідні курси операторів. Вибачаюся. Або агентурна мережа «Серб» в Дніпрі, яка діяла там довгий час, ми її документували, і було затримано 8 чоловік. Всі вони працювали на ГРУ ГШ. І велику кількість інформації збирали і передавали ворогу, в тому числі організовували ракетні обстріли. І всі ми пам'ятаємо той страшний, скарботний по-справжньому момент, коли загинуло багато цивільних і ракета потрапила до звичайного житлового будинку. Це також була їхня робота. Сьогодні вони дають уже викривальні покази. Наприклад, найбільша агентурна мережа, вона була в Миколаївській області і нараховувала 13 чоловік. Тому ця робота продовжується. Попереду багато сюрпризів і, повірте мені, ворог не пройде повз нас. До речі, держзрадники наразі отримують від 12 до 15 років. У нас суд процесуально незалежний, ми ні в якому разі не втручаємося, але в середньому саме такі терміни позбавлення волі. Хоча є й багато пожиттєвих. Наприклад, як прокурор Миколаївської міжрайонної прокуратури, очільник, який бажав стати прокурором області, ФСБ йому пообіцяло цю посаду. Зливав все, що можна було, вибачте, тільки злити. Сьогодні вже він засуджений до пожиттєвого терміну ув'язнення. Перейдемо до релігійного кейсу. Це тема всіх цікава.
Давайте, у нас 1 хвилинка залишається.
Плюс, прискорююсь, 73 провадження, 22 вироки відносно священнослужителів. Той, хто під рясою і з кадилом вчиняє злочини проти основ національної безпеки, для нього немає жодної індулігенції. Також ми їх відповідно документуємо. Якщо ми перейдемо швидко до інформаційної безпеки, я відмічу наш ДКІП. Сьогодні ДКІП – це симбіоз спецпризначенців і тих, хто займається інформаційною безпекою. Ви маєте розуміти, що ворог, окрім агентурного проникнення, він займається технічним проникненням. І, по суті, сьогодні працюють мобільні групи в силах оборони, наші мобільні групи, які виявляють дані проникнення. Я вам скажу відверто, з початку війни у нас виявлено 7 ворожих ШПЗ. ШПЗ – це шифрована програмна закладка. Тобто це той жук, який ворог дистанційно поміщає в телефони наших представників Сил оборони, а потім отримує інформацію. Це все виявляється, локалізовується, але з свого боку ми проводимо кібернаступальні заходи по відношенню до ворога. З зрозумілих причин деталей розповідати не буду. З врахуванням браку часу ви мене підганяєте, я скажу одне, що, повірте, Служба безпеки України є, була і буде скальпелем в руках українського народу, яка буде вирізати ці ганебні явища, які я перерахував, як ракові пухлини. І дуже важливий елемент нашої майбутньої перемоги – це саме наша єдність. Тому ми всі маємо єднатися заради однієї важливої нашої історичної мети. Я дякую всім за увагу, з великою повагою до кожного з присутніх і до глядачів. Дякую.
Дуже дякую. У нас є ще спікер Олександр Литвиненко, голова служби зовнішньої розвідки. І це, напевно, у нас, до речі, такий спікер серед наших, так би мовити, спецслужб, найменш публічний, найменш ми вас чуємо, більше чуємо пана Буданова, ось Василь Васильович, у нас дуже активний в медіа. А розкажіть, будь ласка, про роботу служби зовнішньої розвідки. З якими викликами ви дійсно стикаєтеся зараз? І я так розумію, що це безпосередньо теж ваша робота стосується протидіям цим ідеологічним цим кампаніям з дезінформації, які влаштовує Росія.
Щиро дякую за можливість виступити. Ви знаєте, я краще буду говорити не про те, що ми робимо, а те, що робить наш противник і як ми йому протидіємо. Ми поговоримо пару слів, скажемо про сучасну Росію і про те, що вони роблять в інформаційній сфері. Як вже про це казав Дмитро Іванович і як про це Василь Васильович, одна із основних наративів, сучасних наративів росіян – підрив легітимності нашої влади. Але коли вони зазіхають на нашу легітимність, я би порадив почати з того, що відбувається в самій Російській Федерації. Репресіями вони після 24.02 фактично перетворили політичний ландшафт Росії на середньоруську рівнину. Нічого над нею не викликається. Масштаб цих репресій вже давно не поступається не тільки брежневським, але й хрущовським часам. А за розмірами строків, ув'язнення, які надаються, вже давно дійшов до сталінських часів. Станом на початок 24-го року фігурантом політично мотивованих кримінальних переслідувань вважається 1871 особа. До ймовірно репресованих політв'язнів надносять понад 605 осіб. А порівняється це з тим, що за офіційними даними з 56 по 89 рік в Радянському Союзі за політичними статтями були засуджені 8145 осіб. За 30 років 8145 осіб, а зараз лише за 2 роки понад 1000 осіб, майже 2000 осіб. Смертю колонії російського опозиціонера Навального і особливо ганебні спекуляції навколо видачі його тіла стали ще одним шляхом портрет сучасної Росії. Про що, власне, це говорить? Про що каже ця ситуація? Про те, що російська влада боїться. Вона боїться свого народу і вона боїться світу. Світ жорстко відповідає на російську агресивну політику. Українські збройні сили, український народ зупиняє росіян. Але, власне, і в самій Росії, попри те, що там, як завжди, на всіх язиках все мовчить, бо благоденствує. Завдяки, попри крихку стабільність, яка характеризує сучасну Росію, ситуація не настільки позитивна, як вони вдають. Гіперцентралізація приводить до затримки прийняття рішень. В Російській Федерації посилюються проблемні рухи. Знову з'явився такий небезпечний рух, який призвів до фактичного колапсу Радянського Союзу під час Афганської війни і до відступу Росії під час Першої Чеченської. Я кажу про рух солдатських дружин і матерів. І от в цих умовах Російська Федерація прагне провести вибори Путіна. Безумовно, вони пройдуть і пройдуть з позитивним результатом. 75% візьме участь у виборах, 75% проголосують за Володимира Путіна. Але результати цих виборів мусимо дуже чітко усвідомлювати, наскільки вони легітимні. Підстави для цих сумнівів доволі широкі. Сумнівна легітимність самого висування Путіна на це, який вже в нас на 5-й фактично.
Ну, десь так, думаю, це і не має значення.
Сумнівність ухвалення поправок. Участь у виборах з міжнародним ордером на арешт. Найвідоміший прецедент такої ж ситуації – Слободан Мілошевич на виборах 2000 року. Але ця аналогія має дуже цікаву подальший розвиток. Бульдозерна революція і міжнародний трибунал в Гаазі. Перестраховка з недопуском жодного кандидату, який хоча б створював ілюзію конкурентності. Масштаби фальсифікації. Достатньо згадати про технології дистанційного електронного голосування, адміністративний ресурс, недопущення спостерігачів і таке інше. І нарешті, слон у кімнаті, вибори на окупованих територіях, де безумовно будуть 96% явки і 98% тих, хто проголосує за. Тому, коли росіяни починають говорити про легітимність, можемо чітко усвідомлювати. Це наслідок їхніх страхів. Це наслідок переносу на інших власного внутрішнього жаху. Все це сьогоднішня російська реальність, які, і ми мусимо дуже чітко це усвідомлювати, хочуть перенести в Україну і не тільки в Україну. В усі країни, які колись були загарбані Росією і Радянським Союзом. Країни Балтії, в Молдову, Польщу і так далі.
У нас,
це слід
на жаль,
знати.
у нас час добігає кінця. Насправді тема дуже цікава. Я би з задоволенням я вважаю, що потрібна така окрема, напевно, набагато довше за часом дискусія і обговорити всі ці історії з ультраправими в Європі і з меседжами на зовнішнє, але просто, на жаль, ми дуже стислі в часі. Тому дякую всім за участь в нашій панелі, в нашій дискусії. Дякую всім, хто прийшов.
Дякуємо вам, дякуємо і вам, і усім учасникам та учасницям наших сесій, обговорень в рамках форуму «Україна. Рік 2024». Форум триває, і ми повернемося скоро в ефір, тому що очікуємо незабаром на прес-конференцію президента України.
усі присутні. Перш за все, я хочу вам подякувати за те, що 2 роки ви з Україною, з українським народом, з нами усіма. Кожна з майданчиках світу, ми за це. Увага для України, фокус на цій війні світу залежить в більшості своїй від вас. Частину свого життя ви віддали Україні. Для нас це один з наших захистів, інформаційний захист від фейків в Росії, від песимізму, я б навіть так сказав, деяких країн у світі, майже на всіх континентах світу. І для нас це дуже важливо те, що ви з нами. Я вам вдячний за підтримку, за те, що говорите правду, за те, що засуджуєте російську криваву війну проти мирної України. І навіть такі складні моменти, які у нас були в кінці минулого року, розфокус всього світу, ми в деякі моменти втрачали увагу. Я вважаю, що ви повернули все це. Я хочу вам за це подякувати. Хочу подякувати нашим воїнам. Передусім вони повертають Україну всюди, де була раніше Україна і буде. Я в цьому впевнений. Нашому народові, людям, нашим українцям, де вони зараз не були. Ваша підтримка важлива, ваша робота важлива. І це факт. Без вас України немає. Тому з нашого боку ми будемо робити все, щоб перемогти. Я в цьому впевнений. Як би нам всім складно не було, все одно всім легше, ніж нашим воїнам. І тому я їм ще раз вдячен і хочу подякувати рідним, близьким. Дякую. Тих воїнів і не тільки, і тих, хто втратив близьких в час цієї війни. Вам подякувати, що ви виховали таких героїв, таких людей, справжніх українців. І ми обов'язково відповімо за все агресору Путіну, Росії, його колу, цих нелюдей. Дякую за стійкість воїнів, вашу, народу України. І дуже надіємося, що ви з нами будете до самого кінця, до перемоги України. До перемоги України. Крапка.
Можемо починати.
Так, будь ласка.
Лівий берег давайте, Соня, будь ласка.
Соня, please. Буквально 2 години тому Андрій Єрмак в цій аудиторії сказав дослівно таке, що на другому саміті може бути другому саміті миру може бути така ситуація, що ми запросимо разом представників Російської Федерації, де їм буде представлений цей план на той випадок, якщо хто там на той час буде представляти країну-агресора, захоче дійсно припинити цю війну і повернутися до справедливого миру. Ви самі в інтерв'ю Fox News говорили, що Путіну довіряти не можна. Більше того, зрозуміло, що навряд він відмовиться від своїх маніакальних ідей загарбання всієї України. То які тоді предметні чинники тиску на росіян і на їх схиляння до переговорів на наших умовах?
Дякую вам за всі ці запитання. Передусім, що стосується саміту, ми вважаємо, що це дуже правильно посилюватись на полі бою, і це залежить від нас, нашого виробництва і від наших партнерів, і так само дуже правильно посилюватись дипломатично. Ми не хочемо, щоб нам нав'язували будь-які формати перемовин, будь-які формули миру, країни, навіть наші партнери, всі ті країни, які сьогодні не тут і не в війні. Я їм не бажаю війни, але дуже важливо, що ініціатива може бути і йти тільки від України. Вона була започаткована в Індонезії на G20, G19, якщо бути чесним, і тому сьогодні ми підійшли до моменту першого саміту. Перший саміт інаугураційний, він відбудеться на сьогодні, поки що це так. Я надіюсь, що він буде навесні. Нам не можна втратити цю дипломатичну ініціативу. І він буде в Швейцарії. Другий саміт, ми хотіли би, щоб він був, може, і не на європейському континенті, а на іншому. І я думаю, що також найближчі тижні, місяці ця інформація обов'язково з'явиться. На першому саміті буде розроблений план.
First summit will present a plan, and then technically countries will look at each crisis brought by this war, and they will prepare a document. Following the example of the grain initiative, we said we cannot trust Putin, and we were right. We agreed concrete steps, and this initiative worked with the help of Turkey and Guterres, the General Secretary, and then our plan was handed over to Russia. It was regardless of whether they agreed or disagreed, we showed that this is a format we can work with. If this doesn't work, nevertheless, we will proceed to implement the corridor with our own resources. And this is how it happened. The initiative worked for a year, thanks to our partners. After that year, Russia left the initiative, and this proves that we cannot trust them. But we were ready to implement our own corridor, grains corridor, and it's important that we did not let our partners down. We stood up for the law, for justice. We adopted this format for the grain initiative, and the partners saw that Russia cannot be trusted. But Russia couldn't do anything about it. Grain was exported. That is a positive, and that was an important result in wartime. And the same concerns the summit. Whenever the countries are ready with a fair document, this doesn't mean Russia will accept it. Nobody can guarantee who's going to be at the top or representing Russia. But we say there will be a document, just as with the grain initiative. This document will be presented by negotiators in one format or another to the Russian side, and we will be ready to hold the second peace summit and take appropriate diplomatic steps towards a just peace and the end to the war. This is our initiative. We must move forward. I do not want, after elections in various countries, after a year of various elections, I do not want an undemocratic country or a very democratic country to present their own initiative, which would be at odds with the interests of a country at war. Thank you. ABC.
James Longman from ABC News.
ABC. Скажіть, будь ласка, Україна програє у цій війні?
Is Ukraine losing the war?
Здається, зброї досить лише тільки, щоб
Seems you only have enough weapons to maintain the status quo. Is it time to negotiate with Putin, especially given the US election in November?
А можна говорити з глухою людиною?
Can you talk to a deaf man?
Чи можна говорити з людиною, яка
Can you talk to someone, to a man who kills his opponents?
Do you have translation? You don't have. You good?
Нема перекладу у вас, нема? Все нормально?
I think you are interested in not only in the question.
Я думаю, що вас цікавить не лише запитання. Будь ласка, візьміть навушничок, я почекаю. Ага, є переклад.
Please take up your headphones, I'll wait.
Тому питання в юридичній і політичній
So
площині
this
ми запропонуємо
is a question of a legal and
погодитись з тим, що
political nature. We will propose a platform where he can accept that he has lost this war and that this was a huge mistake and tragedy for us and a tragedy for the democratic world. And There should be justice on this. Will Ukraine lose this war? I am confident that we won't. The most difficult part of the war was 2 years ago, and we have no alternative not to win. We have no way we can lose. What does it mean if Ukraine loses? We will not exist. And we definitely cannot accept such a finale to a struggle for our lives. Will Ukraine lose? Will it be difficult for us? Will there be a lot of losses? That is up to you, the partners, the Western world. If we are strong with weapons, we will not lose the war, we will win, because Putin's steps backwards will happen every day and will affect his society. And then he will think about his internal security. If you look at the messages coming from Putin today, he uses facts and figures, and he talks about plans for 2030. That is the answer, what he's going to do. He can see himself in power until 2030, and we would like to put an end to him before that.
Далі, будь ласка, Радіо Свобода. Ось тут перший ряд.
Radio Liberty.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Дякую, пане президенте. Цей момент, коли можна подивитися на те, що сталося в Україні.
At this time of reflection, we can look at what's happening in Ukraine and how do you see victory now? Has your definition of victory changed in the last 2 years? What has changed? What has not? Have you changed the way you communicate with the people of Ukraine about the future? War changes a country. It makes some people more resilient, some people more tired, and generally tougher. I am no exception. I am a citizen of Ukraine, and just as our society changes, I change too. My style of communication depends on the tone I have adopted and what's inside me and what's inside society. I am an inseparable part of the Ukrainian society, and that is how I communicate. I try to be as honest as possible about what's happening. There are some details I cannot divulge, but when I speak, I speak the truth, and that is important to me. And that's a fact. There is no alternative. Ukraine and Ukrainians have no alternative to their own security, to fighting for their own security, and it must be guaranteed. And this is our responsibility too. Our domestic security, a strong army until we are in NATO, but also security guarantees from our partners, the guarantees that prevent any return of aggression from Russia, that they will protect us.
Далі, будь ласка, Уніан. По центру в кінці.
Union News Agency.
Дякую. Пане президенте, ви неодноразово
President,
зверталися до наших союзників щодо
You
потреби
spoke to our allies many times about an immediate need for long-range weapons to strike on Russian targets, such as attack missiles. You have had close contacts lately with world leaders, including Joe Biden. You spoke to him on the phone, you spoke online, there's been a G7 online meeting, and we may have had other contacts we don't know about. In your opinion, your request about an immediate delivery of long-range weapons, was it heard? Have our partners understood how badly we need it now and not 3 or 4 months away from now? As for ATACMS, 300 kilometers is the range. You understand why we need it. It is something I don't want to talk about in detail, but we all understand. And Russia understands what we're going to do with it. And indeed, we have been working for some time on long-range weapons. I would tell you in general terms. I am positive about the recent response from our partners as regards this kind of weapons. Okay?
Окей. Катіден, Франція. Ось.
My question is related to the previous one about France.
Моє запитання попереднього стосується, але відносно Франції, це найбільший мілітарний член ЄС, а тим не менш ми лише 15
France is one of the biggest military members of the EU, and you know President Macron said he could do more for Ukraine. Do you agree? I recently spoke to Emmanuel. We met. And I think we signed a very good agreement on security guarantees from France. I am pleased with it. And I think there will be some more detail that we agreed with him, but I would like him to talk about them. As you know, we're expecting President Macron to visit Ukraine. He will come here. I won't say the date, but it will be soon. And I think there will be some more detail emerging about France's support for Ukraine. Very important new detail. As for artillery, Emmanuel knows that we are grateful for their artillery. It works well. We have created an artillery coalition, and we have several dozen, and I don't remember how open this information is, but we are expecting for several dozen systems from France, several dozen. This is important. This will strengthen our country. There are also other things, but we will talk about them later when he comes. ENN.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's good to be here.
Дякую, пане президенте. Рада бути тут в Києві. Вже маємо 2 роки від початку війни.
It's been 2 years since the start of the war. But for the first time since the invasion, US support for Ukraine is in serious doubt. Do you still hope for the Congress? Hope, yes, I still hope. And I am sure that there will be a positive outcome. Otherwise, I don't understand what world we're living in. Definitely not the same world. We are counting on Congress support. They know that we need their support within a month. I met senators and both parties, and every signal in every format has been made to the president and the opposition. They know what we need, and we need a decision within a month. That is our demand. As for air defense, they also know our requirement. We need more. And we are to talk about today, we will talk about our vision for this. At any rate, this money is mostly in the US and with the companies manufacturing these systems, weapons that we need, and we mustn't forget that. These are not toys. As for the Congress and the war in Ukraine. And we also have security guarantees. There is specifics regarding the money. We insisted on these specifics because we can see challenges in the United States. But we're counting on the United States to remain the leaders of democracy in the world.
Далі, будь ласка, обоз UA. Праворуч, в куту.
Добрий вечір.
Леся Гасич, видання Босюей. Пане президенте, польсько-українське
Mr.
питання. Ми всі
President,
знаємо, що відповідні
the
структури
Polish
займаються
question,
вирішенням
we
цього,
know that
але
certain
також розуміємо, що тут багато
departments are
політики.
dealing with this,
І
but
з
we
одного
also can
боку
see a
вони
lot of
кажуть, що
politics. And
підтримують
on the
Україну
one
до
hand,
кінця, з
they
іншого,
say they
що там
support Ukraine to the
одобрюють,
end. On
схвалюють
the
ті
other,
протести своїх фермерів,
they
як сьогодні.
approve
Чи є у вас
farmer
діалог з вашим
protests, such
польським
as today.
колегою в цьому плані,
Are
чи
you talking
позитивні
to your
зрушення?
Polish counterpart? Is there any
Підтримувати
positive
Україну треба
progress?
зараз, а не до кінця.
Ukraine
Це
must be
важливо,
supported
тому що
today,
кінець
not to
може
the
бути
end,
швидко.
because the end
Якщо
can come
по-різному
soon
так підтримувати Україну. А
if
у нас
you vary your
з Туском
support for
робочі
Ukraine.
відносини.
We have a working relationship with Tusk, and the Prime Minister has a relationship with him too. We've met, we also met with Duda, and I'm naming these names so that you can picture the response, and also with Ursula von der Leyen. Since April this year, I've been saying that this is a political issue. Our Ukrainian society and some media criticized me for this rhetoric. I was absolutely right, and this has been confirmed by the European Commission. I said any election in Poland, any team will not change this direction. It is a political direction, and we can see the internal struggle in Poland, but we are grateful to the Polish society, which has stood with the Ukrainians from the beginning, and this is a fact, and we would not want politicians for this border to be between our countries. I believe they are intelligent people and they will see the light, just as our people understood why it's happening. Using Ukraine as a means of pressure on European institutions is simply unfair. That's what I'm saying. I believe the prime ministers will find steps. As president, I speak openly. It is important for us to maintain our union, our alliance with Poland, and if we do not find solutions, then we will protect our business. Thank you.
Sky News, другий ряд по центру.
Sky News.
Дякую. Джон Спаркс, Sky News. Ми щойно повернулися з передової.
We have just returned from the front line in Kupiansk, and I wanted to ask you, will Ukraine lose more territory? Are you ready to give up more territory while you are expecting additional weapons to arrive? The Russian pressure is fairly strong near Kharkiv and Kupiansk, where you were. It has been intense, and the intensity of artillery from Russia has been at the ratio of 1:12, and this happened at the end of last year and the beginning of this year. Right now, we have a ratio of 1:1.7. So we have reduced their advantage, but they still have a significant advantage. And we need to reach the point where we are able to conduct a counter-offensive when we were able to reach a point of 1:2, 1:3. And at that point, we were able to repulse the Russians. Until we reach that point, we will continue to lose 100, 150 meters. Unfortunately, it is important, but strategically, it is more important not to lose people. Because in these small towns or villages where there are 10, 20 houses and there are individuals, some people who don't want to leave. They need to save themselves and their children, God forbid. Mostly there are no children, but if we talk about Avdiivka or other the Kharkiv region, Donbass. Russia has highlighted this in the media because they want to show their advantage. But what kind of advantage is it when the battle over Avdiivka has been going on since 2014, not even from the day of the first day of invasion? The media and journalists have visited there and could see this back then. So the answer is simple. We need to put pressure on the partners regarding the packages that had already been agreed. And if we do this, then Russia's chances will be smaller. But if we have parity in weapons, then we definitely will show a result, as we have done more than once.
Далі, будь ласка, ICTV.
Скажіть, будь ласка, по закону про мобілізацію, там більше тисячі, там,
The law on mobilization, there have been more than 3,000 amendments. When do you expect it to be passed, and what results do you expect from it? As for American support, if we don't get it within a month, do we have any internal reserve in addition to European money? And what are we counting on? When we talk about American assistance, we need to understand that this isn't about the financial reserve. This is weapons. Again, mostly this money is about weapons. So you understand the result. The result will be that we will be weaker on the battlefield. And I can't tell you what will happen. I don't have a reserve. We have the weapons we have. We will continue looking for other opportunities to buy weapons, to take additional loans, to put pressure on partners, us. And again, this is an issue concerning specific weapons packages, specific defense for our country. 1.5 billion is the Patriot, the cost of the Patriot system. But you can't buy it. You can't buy it without the United States. That's your answer. Can you increase Ukraine's air defense without the US? No, you can't. Without systems that don't exist elsewhere in the world. The world has alternatives in a very small quantity. So when we say, is there an alternative to US assistance? Is there somewhere we can get the money? We can find the money, but we will not find the same quantity of weapons. As for the bill you asked about, your question has already mentioned the difficulties. 3,000 amendments. Well, let Parliament work on it and respond to the country and tell the country what will happen. A question from Italy, Corriere della Sera.
Пане президенте, доброго вечора.
Mr. President, good evening.
Пане президенте, якщо Сполучені Штати зупинять
the United States
поставку зброї та боєприпасів, чи
може the delivery of weapons and ammunition, can Europe make up for it? You spoke to Mrs. Meloni yesterday. Can this US assistance be replaced?
About European support, I understood, I heard. What do you say?
Я почув про Європу. Ви вчора спілкувалися з пані
Yesterday you spoke to Prime Minister Meloni. Can Europe make up for the support from US? Partially, I said there are certain weapons that rest with the US.
Чи може, наприклад, Німеччина нам
Can Germany give us their defense systems that they use to defend their state? I don't know. I'm not sure that the German society will be able to give up all their air defense. It will not be prepared to do so, I think. As for long-range weapons, that's a different issue. We will work on it with various countries. There are not many such countries, but we will. As for Italy, you are Italian. Are you prepared to offer your shoulder?
Саме тому і важливо говорити з вами, пане президенте, тому що
That's why it is important to talk to you, Mr. President, because you know there are a lot of pro-Putin people in Italy. So it is important to mention Italy and Europe. That's why we ask, can you conduct this war without US assistance? I'm very thankful to Giorgia Meloni. I'm pleased with the agreement we signed yesterday, but you're right, there are a lot of pro-Putin people in Italy. Where you need to stop their visas. So if you can't give me air defense, and I know you have it, I know this in detail. This will not create any insecurity for you because you know what happens when Russians come to your country. So that's why you need to put pressure on them. At any rate, you have a lot of weapons. But not everything is up to Italy. That's why we mentioned G7. Other countries that have a lot that they can give. Not only Patriot, but also Iris, Hawks. There are many weapons in various countries, but will that be enough? I can't tell you that. Mr. President, since we mentioned Italy and Europe, I have just returned from Avdiivka. I was there for 2 weeks. In addition to weapons, you also need ammunition. And Europeans are trying to increase the production of ammunition. What do you think? Do you feel Europe is changing? Yes, it is, especially in the last few months. I can see changes. Their attitude to the war, to Ukraine, in this war, I think they understand how insecure this is. Putin isn't an enemy to only us. He's an enemy to all of Europe. And it is clear that he wants to continue this war. And that's why the leaders of European countries have started to increase the production of ammunition, especially 155 millimeter caliber. Will this be enough? As I said in one of the interviews, I said frankly what I thought, that the issue is not munitions for your country. It isn't about ammunition storage. You gave a lot to Ukraine already. The issue is society. Society is not prepared to fight. And God forbid Putin won't come to us, but believe me, that at the beginning of Ukraine's tragedy, back in 2014, there was no preparedness. That's why it is important to strengthen country, to make it strong. And it is important for Italy too, to put an end to this war, put an end to Putin's war in Ukraine.
телеканал Рада, будь ласка.
Rada TV Ukraine.
Пане президенте, вітаю. Є
Mr.
різна
President,
інформація про втрати в війні.
There's
Разом з тим,
various reporting about
це боротьба
casualties.
за світову демократію.
At the same time, this is a fight for democracy in the world. Our partners know, our neighbors in Europe know. Can you say what price Ukraine is paying?
Я не знаю, чи я маю право.
I don't know if I have the right to do so.
Це серйозний просто момент дуже.
It is a serious point.
Давайте почнемо з моменту. Нещодавно були голоси в радикальній
Let's say
частині
this. There have been voices in the radical audience in the US who are not on our side. They ask, how much more can you lose? Ukraine has lost 300,000 people. Then there was information from the Russians who said Ukraine lost more than 100,000 men. And the Russians lost around 35, 60,000. All of that is a lie. That is absolutely nonsense. Every human being is a loss. And these are huge losses that we've had. 31,000 Ukrainians, Ukrainian military died in this war. Not 300,000, not 150,000 that Putin says with his lying entourage, but every casualty, every loss is a huge loss to us. Russians, 180,000 Russians died. The total casualties in Russia, there were 180,000 deaths. I don't know how many missing, and up to 500,000 wounded. On the Ukrainian side, 31,000 dead. And this is very painful for us. I won't say how many wounded, because then Russia will know how many people left the battlefield. I'm just not going to say. There are missing in action. I'm not going to play with those figures, because the latest exchange showed that if we are inaccurate, because we've returned some people who were missing in action and they've come back alive, I'm not going to say anything. And tens of thousands left in civilians who died in the occupied territories. I don't know how many were murdered, how many were tortured to death, how many were deported. You know, there are lists, but we don't know how many of our people have been murdered. We will know when this is over, when we put an end to this Russia.
Будь ласка, в тій же частині Guardian, Люк. Будь ласка, тобі слово.
The Guardian.
Hi, Mr. President. Вітаю, пане президенте. Великобританія мала кількох прем'єр-міністрів останнім часом.
The UK has seen a number of prime ministers lately, and in the autumn there will be another election. And most likely yet another prime minister. Have you met Keir Starmer? And another question about the UK. Has the UK given you storm shadows with the long range? Can you confirm long range storm shadows? I have no doubt that the UK has given us storm shadows, and we have used them, and we have used a lot of them. We are very grateful to Rishi, to his team, and the British society. I didn't quite understand who I was meant to be meeting,
Майбутнім прем'єр-міністром.
the future prime minister, a likely future prime minister, Keir Starmer, the Labour leader. And he is 25 points ahead. That is your decision who the prime minister will be, but I have met the prime minister and the opposition leader and their teams when I was in parliament. I would say I have good relations with him. Voice of America. Mr. President, you mentioned the peace summit. Later this year in Washington, there will be a NATO summit. Ukraine is asking for an invitation from NATO. Neither Germany nor the United States have given an indication that this invitation will be forthcoming. What risks does NATO face and international security face if this invitation is not forthcoming? Thank you for your question. An invitation depends, right now, with all due respect for all partners. I understand all partners support Ukraine, and it's an invitation to NATO. And all partners see that Ukraine will be in NATO someday, but as of today, this is up to the United States and Germany. That is a fact. What risks? I cannot tell you. I do not see any risks in inviting Ukraine into NATO. I don't see any risks there. Any risks that are being stated by politicians, they are associated with Ukraine's membership of NATO and the risk of possibly a strong response from Putin. I don't see any risks in extending an invitation to Ukraine. Maybe there's something I don't know. Oh, if we are not invited, then we are not invited.
Українська правда, давайте.
Мені взяти? Роман Кравець, Українська правда. Я насправді хочу поговорити трошки про минуле.
I would like to talk about the past. 2019, 9th of December, Paris, the Normandy meeting. You, Merkel, Macron, Putin. We all remember the pictures from the press conference, but there was another meeting where there were no cameras. You met Putin on a one-to-one basis, and very little is known about that meeting, only the fact that it took place. And I think it's a good time to talk about it. What happened at that meeting? What did Putin, how did he behave? What did he say? And what happened behind the closed doors? What do you mean, how did Putin behave towards me? What tone he took. We had a long conversation in various tones. I told him that the Minsk agreements will not work because the whole idea of troop withdrawal along the contact line was not working. I gave him figures. I had experience. I had traveled along the contact line, and I knew, we took first steps of withdrawal, and I showed him, look at the overall figures, how much has been withdrawn, and we said that this would take 20 years, and it means that for 20 years we will be in a state of a frozen conflict, which would suggest that the war was not over. And that's what we talked about. We bargained for a long time. And also we had a story on gas and the court case that we won, but you know how they react to legal cases. And they accepted that they would hand over the money, and we did receive the money. And number 3 was the issue of exchanging people. We exchanged over 100 people, and he kept raising a ceasefire, as you know. But how could that work? We knew how it would work, and we saw how it was working. For a few months we tried, and nevertheless we had losses. So the tone was, well, nothing. Was that a surprise? I don't remember. I think it was in a different life. Everything was different then. I don't recall all the detail, to be honest. We need to sit down and think and remember. I remember it took a long time.
Deutsche Welle, будь ласка, в кінці тут з цього боку.
Deutsche Welle.
Дякую, пане президенте. Наскільки важливе для України німецькі ракети Таурус?
How important are the Taurus missiles from Germany to Ukraine, and why do you think they're not being given to you? They are important to us. I'm grateful to the Chancellor. He showed his leadership in Europe. He has a very strong agreement with us, and we have serious support. This weapon you mentioned is important to us. And I'll tell you this. The United States, then Germany, and it's always thus. I'm not saying the Chancellor depends on the President, but the sequence of actions in decision-making on this or that weapon has always followed this pattern. If the United States made a step forward, then we could also use this as an example in conversations with others. Let's see, we got these weapons, let's work with you. That's all. But since I am here being positive about the United States, I believe we will have a result everywhere.
LCE, Франція.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Дуже дякую, пане президент. Коли ви говорите із західними партнерами, чи не
When you talk to Western partners, do you get a sense that some of them are still afraid of a full-blown defeat for Russia in Ukraine? Is there a strategic understanding of this?
Щодо можливості постачання Франції Міраж-2000 літаків.
What about the possibility of Mirage fighter jets from France? Is that possible?
First of all, don't ask me, please, who, but they're afraid.
Ну, перш за все, не питайте, хто саме, але вони бояться. Це на перше запитання.
They are afraid. Don't ask me who. Your second question.
Так, ми говорили про літаки.
Yes, we do speak about jets. Thank you.
Будь ласка, РБК Україна.
Мілан Ліліч, РБК Україна. Пане президенте, в нинішній війні на виснаження Росія заручилася підтримкою ряду тоталітарних режимів.
Russia has secured support from a number of totalitarian dictatorships, and they are expecting the West to tire of Ukraine. At the same time, support from the several countries for Ukraine is being slowed down by the political events events and by the failings of their manufacturing. What can Ukraine do? What will Ukraine do if our key partners decide to stop supporting us? We will work diplomatically so that nobody stops supporting us. And this isn't only up to us, but it is also up to societies in those countries. I must state with regret that this depends on elections. If a society supports assistance to Ukraine, that we will get assistance. If not, then assistance will be reduced or lost, or you will lose support from your society. The bravest people challenge the public opinion and in favor of supporting Ukraine. And I know there are very few such people. Very few of those who lost their posts for the sake of supporting Ukraine because they went against public opinion. Yes, many leaders changed public opinion, especially in those countries where there was a lot of Russian presence in the media space, and they changed, they broke it, and they told society the truth. So that everybody understands where they are. And I'm grateful to them. Yes, I know some may leave, but some new ones may arrive. So we are working with other continents too. It is more difficult. Europe is the strongest, and the United States. Europe understands that the war is not somewhere far away, and the United States is a leader, is our partner that understands that we're fighting for democracy, and Russia will weaken all this if they win over us. The alternative is drones, our domestic manufacturing. It is pretty good. I have mentioned this. It's a fact. And I think the defense minister spoke about it today. You've had some discussion here. They procure a lot of drones. So I think together we will get 1 million plus, as I said, of various types. Some types of drones are being used as ammunition even, and they may even be cheaper that way, because even ordinary artillery shells that used to cost $1,500 or 1,500 euros before the war, we are already seeing contracts where people are offering 4 to 8. So you can see, some derive good business from war. So money can help. There are countries that we are not saying this aloud, but some countries have a commercial interest. They don't care what will happen to us, but they're interested in the money. If there is money, they will supply shells. We don't judge them. We fight for every shell. There are countries, the Nordic countries, I'm grateful to them. We don't have a lot, but they buy. And because of our special relationship, I do not ask where they get it. They get it. How they find it, well, they are that kind of people. Small Denmark. Well, Denmark is a great country for us, but they find it everywhere. They work on this every day. Their society, well, all Nordic countries were skeptical about our European future, but now they're fully on our side. And this shows that they know who Putin is. They understand this enemy. And this also shows that a lot depends on the leaders. The leaders are talking to their public, to their society, and they show it. And the people are great because they support. I met Mete in Lviv. And support in Denmark is growing. Public support of Ukraine is growing 2 years after the start of the war. And this shows that their country is united internally. It is a strong country that chose a path in favor of Ukraine against the war. And this is a very correct position, I believe.
Вітаю, пане президенте. Олег Борисов, телеканал Freedom. Чи планується найближчим часом зустріч з президентом Ердоганом?
Do you plan to meet President Erdogan in the near future? And if so, will you raise Erdogan's support to free not only our prisoners of war, but also political prisoners who are held by the Kremlin?
Так, найближчим часом
In the near future, I have no plans for a meeting with President Erdogan. We do meet them at various levels. We have contacts at various levels. Turkey, Qatar, and the UAE, Saudi Arabia are the countries we work with regarding exchange lists, including Crimean Tatars and Crimeans, many of whom are journalists and political prisoners, creatives. There are various people who unfortunately have been captured. There are lists. We're working with the four countries, these four countries.
Canada, Globe and Mail.
Thank you, Mr. President. Дякую, пане президенте. Ми раніше говорили про політичні процеси на Заході.
We've been talking about the political process in the West. As regards public opinion, we can see a drop in the levels of support from 30 to 20%. Does this concern you globally and with regards to Canada? If Putin calls you, will you reply? He doesn't have a mobile. How will he call me? I don't talk. I don't use the telegraph of 1917. He will not call me. He doesn't want to end this war. That is a fact today. Weakening their army on the battlefield, weakening them politically, creating political isolation of Russia in the world, and using sanctions to weaken them. This is about making Putin poor. Money is the number one issue for him. This is all about money, and he protects this money, even frozen assets. Abroad. So his weakness is, yes, public opinion, but also business, the business that supports him. I think that's his weakness. If everybody rallies together, and I don't know how many assets there are, 900 billion? I don't know the total amount. But even there's 300 billion in Europe in frozen assets. But this money is unconditionally handed over to Ukraine. I think this will weaken him a lot. He will not be able to protect the business that's around him, his big business, the oligarchs. He will not be able to. So this would be a very good hit, bloodlessly. Then he might call not only me, he'll call everybody to look for ways to end this war. What else did you ask?
What about support? But you spoke about your support. You are from Canada.
Але ви так, ви казали про підтримку вашої країни, ви ж з Канади. Про прослаблення підтримки.
About the weakening in support.
Ще більше виборців кажуть, що забагато вже.
Are you saying it's 25% as opposed to 30%.
25% зараз. А про що це каже?
25%. What does
чому
this
суть
show?
запитання?
What is the essence of your
Що
question?
більше канадців кажуть, що вже забагато підтримки Україні.
That many Canadians think there's been too much.
Я згоден. 70%, якщо це так, канадці
Yes.
праві, треба давати більше.
70% of Canadians, if they say that more needs to be done, then yes, they're right.
Я знав завжди, що канадці на нашому боці. Переважно, що це люди на нашому боці. Я був у Канаді.
These people are overwhelmingly on our side. I was in Canada. I saw people with Ukrainian flags
Уздовж доріг стояли повсюдно
lining the
українські,
streets.
канадці. Я знаю, що вони на нашому боці, тому
I know they're on our side.
знаєте, учора мали дуже конструктивний діалог із
As
Джастіном.
you know, we had a very constructive talk with Justin yesterday, and importantly, we signed a huge agreement with Canada for the 3 billion assistance, and this is a 10-year document, and maybe even for longer until Ukraine joins NATO.
Два коротеньких питання. Що ви відповіли політикам на
Two
Заході та в
questions.
Україні,
What would
які
you
є
say
прихильниками
to
ідеї
politicians in the West and in Ukraine who believe that you are illegitimate as a president from May this year? And number two, how do you see a dialogue with Russians ahead of the Russian election?
Яким ви вбачаєте діалог з росіянами напередодні так
How
званих
do you
президентських
see
виборів
your
там?
dialogue with Russians ahead of elections there?
Щодо легітимності, це не думка
As for legitimacy, this isn't an opinion of Western partners or somebody in our country.
наратив і програма Російської
This is a
Федерації.
narrative that the Russian Federation is pushing. All intelligence services of the G7 have evidence,
Зрозуміло, що це програма
and it is
росіян.
clear to all that this is a Russian program. Everybody is against it, and when Emmanuel visits
Можете поставити йому
from
запитання,
the
він
G7, you can ask
Мало
him,
того,
he
що
will reply.
звучить не дуже весело, то мені
It
дехто з них навіть
not only sounds rather sad, but some of them even tell me the names of people here in this country who are pushing this narrative. It's a bad idea.
зрадницької позиції до України, але
I take this as betrayal of Ukraine,
це програма, конкретна
but it's also a bad idea because there is specific evidence supporting that this is a program from the Russian Federation. I know that some journalists in the United States also have this evidence.
легітимності. А що
That's on
стосується,
legitimacy.
тобто в документі є навіть гроші, які виділяються.
The document even mentions the evidence, even mentions the money that's been allocated for various institutions to push this narrative.
Не скажу. Бачив.
I won't tell you which ones. I have seen it. I have seen the evidence.
Діалогу
As for dialogue
з росіянами,
with Russian people, but what kind of dialogue should I have? What can I say to them?
їх особистий опозиційний політик
They had
в тюрмі.
one opposition politician in prison. They murdered him. We don't have to say how. They murdered him.
Кремлем вбили.
The Kremlin
І
did.
вони іде. Де їх відповідь як суспільства?
So where is their response as society, as the public, as people? It is their
Нещодавно я
citizen.
розмовляв з журналістом американським про
I
це. Він
spoke
також
with
запитує мене,
an American journalist on this. They asked me, don't ask me, ask those people.
земляк.
He is their countryman. And still, they are still blindfolded, still blinkered.
Будуть йти на вибори, і ми
They
з вами
will
знаємо результат. А
turn
судячи
up
по
at
меседжам,
the election and we know the result. And judging by the messages that
у них
the
всюди
Kremlin
звучить
has been putting out, They say 2030, 2030. They're already building, putting down the building blocks for the period until when this person will be in power.
Вітаю, пан президент. Азербайджан, Баку ТВ, репорт агентства.
Azerbaijan, Baku TV. How long is Russia capable of continuing aggression against Ukraine? And what new countries do you think can join the list of friends of Ukraine in this war?
Які нові країни можуть бути у списку друзів
What
України?
new countries can join friends of Ukraine? You mean you may join or have joined? May join? Well, thank you for your question. It is important for us. Well, we would be happy if Azerbaijan supported us. On the peace formula, I spoke to the president, and I think he will support us because Azerbaijan supports Ukraine's territorial integrity. Number two, we are talking about the global south. It is important to have them on board for the peace formula. And at the peace summit, we are working on it. And you know there are countries that are still hesitating in Latin America and in Africa, and we are working to help them choose the side of peace.
Далі Туреччина, Джим Хурієт, я боюся
Turkey.
неправильно вимовити.
Доброго дня, пане президенту, журналіст із Туреччини. У мене буде
Mr. President, I'm a journalist from Turkey.
Всім відомо, що в
Everybody
Росії все
knows
йде по плану, але в Україні
that
теж не все
not
так
everything is
легко.
going to plan in Russia, but also not everything is easy in Ukraine. So in these conditions,
Що буде, щоб сказати про те, що Україна перемогла?
will
І як ви оцінюєте роль
what
посередництва
will clinch
Туреччини?
Ukraine's victory?
Тобто
And what do you think of Turkey's mediation in the peace process and a new grains agreement on the grains corridor? Not everything going to plan, not everything depends on us. Some things depend on us, some things depend on our partners. That's why there are delays. But the main thing is to have a plan, and we have a plan. I can't divulge the details of this plan, and I'll explain why. To be honest, between us, the fewer people know about the Ukrainian army's plans, the sooner victory will come and an unexpected result for Russia. And I will be honest with you, our counteroffensive actions last autumn were on the Kremlin's table before the counteroffensive began, full stop. As for a new grains agreement, as I told President Erdogan, we support expanding these corridors. We would be grateful if there are new ones. We are not looking for an alternative to what's working now. I believe President Erdogan can help us with opening the sea from Mykolaiv. Mykolaiv is important to us, and I know Turkey has been discussing with the General Secretary Guterres the possibility of free navigation in the Black Sea. And we are ready for this conversation. I will be honest, this could be a point that can be decided at the inaugural peace summit. I hope President Erdogan will attend. That is all. Thank you.
Пане президенте, радий вас бачити.
It's wonderful to see you. I am from NBC News. These are historic times. Last night, I took a walk in the city, and I remember meeting you in the past, and it seemed that Russians will not win the war, or there was a time when it seemed like they might capture the city, but you stopped them and pushed them back to the borders. But as my Italian colleague said, I've just come back from Chasiv Yar, and the situation there is very difficult. In your view, you have less arms now, and the Russians are advancing. So the question is this the darkest time for Ukraine since the Russian invasion, when the Russians came close to Kiev? Also, one of your advisors said that the first year of invasion was the year of courage, the second year was the year of resilience. How would you name the third year?
Складне у вас запитання.
Your question is complex.
Я не вважаю, що це найслабший момент, найслабший
I don't believe this is the weakest or darkest moment or the most shocking moment 2 years ago. Right now, this is the most difficult moment for our unity. If we all fall apart outside with our partners and, God forbid, inside, that would be our weakest point. And this has not happened yet. After the Middle East, we understand the world's attention to this tragedy, and that is a fact. And we understand how important it was for journalists to focus on that tragedy. But at the same time, the leaders' focus also moved away from Ukraine, and that is also a fact. Attention was split, and in some regions, they even began to forget that there is a full-scale war on here. And I think that was the most difficult period, not because of the Middle East, but because of various factors colliding. The end of our counteroffensive, the beginning of the Russian Russian offensive, and it began on the 8th of October, in the middle of October. Now we are seeing the consequences of it, and we are weaker in the number of weapons we have. But society didn't see these weaknesses because we were standing strong. The package of support weakened battlefield positions, somewhat weakened. But as regards courage and resilience, well, it's more like chapters in a book. I don't want to talk in those terms. This whole war is about courage. And there are various points. The first year was the year of courage, but every year is a year of courage, absolutely every year. The first year was survival. It was about survival, absolutely. You know, there are certain things we don't mention in interviews or questions. But I will tell you, isolated cities in Ukraine with hundreds of thousands of population without water or food, that was horrible. Nobody remembers it. Maybe I am mistaken. We do remember. When we recall it, we talk about other things which are also important. But that was a year of survival. And that was the most horrid year of survival. We survived. The second year was the year of resilience. Well, after the first winter, yes, maybe resilience in every direction. On the battlefield, the West united, and that was important, increasing manufacturing of various battle weapons, and resilience of the economy too, budget growth, GDP growth. Those are serious things. Third year, it is a breakthrough year because there are elections, there is a division in focus. Some are tired, some say this, others are silent. So yes, it is a breakthrough year, and this year we need all of those things, courage and resilience, in order to survive. This year will decide the format of the end to the war. It will decide how the war ends. Maybe I'm wrong.
Дякую. Забіліна Юлія, НВ. Я хотіла би трошки про внутрішнє.
I wanted to talk about some domestic affairs. Speaking it to Italian TV, you said you spoke of a reset in government, then Commander Zelenskyy was dismissed. And do you expect more changes in the government, and who and why? And does this mean a change in the strategy in some areas? And also on reshuffles, when will we appoint ambassadors to Britain and the Czech Republic? Thank you for your question on international affairs. That is my area of responsibility, and they will be appointed when we have strong people to be appointed to these posts. This does not worsen my decisions and relationships with Rishi Sunak. I also have a strong relationship with the Czech Republic. This is a technical question. We know who the ambassador will be, and he will be appointed, but there are some technical issues. So this is on the ambassadors. As to who and why, it's difficult to say if you don't know who. So when we talk about a reset, it depends on certain things. We had a conversation with the Prime Minister, and it is around a shortage of money. If this deficit continues, we will do our best on the infrastructure to make sure the infrastructure for the government is reduced. And this is not only the cabinet of ministers, but we are prepared to reduce the number of ministries, reduce the number of ministers, and lighten government. So it's not going to be easier, but it'll be more coordinated. And we are absolutely open and ready for this. I think this will depend on the understanding of what will happen in spring. As for the army, and in response to all the questions that have been put before, we are expecting an audit by the Ministry of Defense and the General Staff, and this audit will answer a lot of those questions. Are there any Polish journalists here? Go ahead, please.
Dobry wieczór. Miłosz Gosłowski, Radio Z. Хотів запитати вас, що ви
I would like to ask you, what did you feel today when you saw Ukrainian grain, maybe for the fourth time this week, on Polish soil, and what should Poland do to prevent these situations? What did you feel, I would ask?
Я того не розумію.
I don't really understand. I don't understand it either. What for? What is it done for? It's politics, and it's a story to put this out in the media. You know, especially in the Russian media, that's what's unpleasant. So it is unpleasant that we are playing into their hand with these facts, and I think it is really wrong to have this between us. And when we talk, how can we stop it? Well, this isn't happening in Ukraine. It isn't happening on our soil. I'm not comparing, but I'm just saying facts. Polish grain isn't spilled on our soil or Polish food. We have 1.7 billion of Polish goods imported, food products imported a year into Ukraine. Well, a month, 2, 3, from April, if we block these imports, well, divide this by 12 months, and you will see how much Poland will lose, 158 million a year. People will lose. Why? We are doing everything to stop our relations from being frozen. And you understand there are hotheads in every society, but for our part, Polish goods will keep coming here, whatever Russia might want. And I think we need to resolve this with a new government, because this is a new government that's been voted in, a new prime minister. And I'm not saying what reforms he needs, that is your affair and your right. It's not our story. But as for the international relationship with Ukraine, for the first time to spill grain, what can this be? What can prevent this? Joint security, police, border guards? I think there is enough opportunities. We just need a will. Thank you. The BBC.
Пане президенте, ви отримали
Mr. President, you received a lot of military assistance, but the problem for Ukraine has always been the speed of these deliveries. How disappointed are you with the speed or with the hesitation that's been behind certain problems with delivery? Disappointed. The loss of time and the loss of people. A long war brings more casualties. And different types of casualties, civilian, military, children. And the more of them there are on occupied territories, the more children are there, the more children are deported to Russia. And the longer the war goes on, the more countries begin to hesitate. So time isn't on anybody's side, anybody's. So what else can disappoint me? I'm grateful for the continuing assistance, and it is important for it to be timely because this is a technological war. And I very much count, well, if we're waiting, people are fighting with drones. When you're waiting for long-range weapons, it's a fact. When we're waiting for long-range weapons, and when it arrives, people are already fighting with other means, with other missiles, a different war. So I think we cannot afford to lose more time.
Олена Чернякова, телеканал «Ми Україна». Пане президенте, ви самі згадали про аудит всередині війська.
Ukrainian TV. You've mentioned an audit in the army. 2 weeks ago you ordered it and you asked the defense minister and the commander-in-chief, how will this help us in the war? What do you want to see? What deadlines? And a question from the military I hear. How can you involve more officers in the planning of operations? We have quite a large command, and they're all fighting officers. It is important. A fairly large command staff and some of our partners are involved in order to provide weapons. They know some of the directions of our action in order to provide the right weapons. So we have large numbers involved. And when that happens, the enemy acquires more detail, and that has always been the case. We are involving sometimes different levels of servicemen. If this is Avdiivka, then we involve officers from Avdiivka. Sometimes we visit them. You will have seen it. You won't have seen everything. The commander-in-chief is conducting an audit, and he is visiting every brigade, every town, every area, in order to draw conclusions on the questions you asked. What exactly? Well, this is a question of rotation and reserves. We need to bring order to this issue and put a full stop. We need to let people rest. You can't just fight all the time. We need to have a system where you fight and then you rest. So these are important things. There need to be expectations, and so that we can count on our own resources. And for that, we need to train a normal reserve. They were not trained well, and we need to recognize our own weaknesses. We've always had them, and they exist, and we need to correct this. And in order to correct this, we need to understand what's happening. It's not all on the front line. So reserves, territorial defense, what's happening everywhere. So we need to conduct this audit. Who's in the offices? Why are they in the offices? How many have been demobilized? What's the percentage? How many have been mobilized? What's the percentage of those fighting on the front line? Here's an example. It's about us and our partners. We had a fist for a counteroffensive. I'm not going to say where, and I'm not going to say how much was being prepared. Until today, 4 brigades have been denuded. 4 brigades are deprived of the weapons that have been agreed. Hands were shaken. They did not receive the weapons. 4 brigades. You understand what numbers are involved that could be fighting. They did not fight, these 4 brigades. They were standing still and waiting for the weapons. I'm not making implications. There are questions, and they need to be answered. That's what the audit is for.
Будь ласка, Kyodo News, Японія.
Kyodo News, Japan.
Thank you for having me.
Дякую. Нещодавно командування перейшло до
Recently,
Сирського.
General Syrskyi has been appointed commander-in-chief. We did not hear a clear explanation as to why you dismissed Zaluzhny. And with the new commander-in-chief and post, what is your strategy in 2024? Are you preparing a new counteroffensive? Can you say more? There is a plan, a clear plan. I can't divulge the details. I have no right to do so. This plan is to do with the change in command. There are certain changes. There are several plans to be prepared because due to leaks, information leaks. Why am I changing people, replacing people? I'm sorry, that is our internal matter. Thank
Телеканал
you.
Еспресо. Одразу за вами. Ага.
Добрий день, пане президенте. Дмитро Дідора, телеканал Еспресо.
Mr. President,
Не секрет, що ціллю росіян є не
there is
тільки
no
житлові об'єкти,
secret
по яким вони
that
часто б'ють, а й
Russians are
військові
targeting
об'єкти,
not
зокрема
only
наша оборонна
housing facilities,
промисловість.
but also military facilities, our
Журналісти
defense
з'ясували минулого
industry.
року, що деякі
Journalists
підприємства
last year
оборонні є в
identified
єдиному порталі, щоб
certain
бути точним, секунду,
defense
використання публічних
enterprises
коштів. Я не
that
буду
are
називати, про яке
on the
підприємство
public
саме йде мова,
portal,
однак,
procurement
якщо можна,
portal.
чому
I'm
так
not going to
сталося, та чи
name
буде
these
відповідна
enterprises and
реакція
why are they
правоохоронних
named
органів на
there,
цю
and will there
ситуацію?
be a response from the law enforcement to this situation? Thank you for your question. If you leave the information with me, I will hand it over to the law enforcement so that they can look into it. I have nothing to add. I don't know why this happened.
Дякую. Там же поруч Рай.
Thank you, and Rai TV, Italian TV.
Mr. President. As you can imagine, there is already a lot of curiosity in Italy about what you
Пане
said.
президенте, в
Mr.
Італії
President,
вже чимало зацікавлені
there's a lot of curiosity in Italy about pro-Russian people. Do you have any names? And second question, are there any European countries that are more tending towards pro-Russian narratives? Why are you asking me?
Really, I can't understand what do you want from me?
Я не можу зрозуміти, чого він від мене хоче. Насправді.
Help us to help ourselves.
Допоможіть нам допомогти собі.
That's another question.
А це вже інше питання.
We will help you.
Так, ми вам допоможемо. Підготуємо.
We are preparing a list, but not about Italian. So
Це не про італійців.
We are preparing a list, and that's not only
Перелік російських
about
пропагандистів.
Italians. It is a list of Russian propagandists.
Є такий великий документ. Ми хочемо його
There is a
представити
long
на
list.
рівні
We
єС,
want to
Комісії,
present it to
Європарламенту,
the European
лідерам ЄС,
Commission, the
і
European
також
Parliament,
США.
and the leaders of the
Йдеться
EU
про
and the United
пропагандистів,
States.
також про
These are
компанії, які
propagandists
мають тісні
and
зв'язки
their
з росіянами,
campaigns and the companies that have close links with the Russians that are trying to circumvent sanctions. And this is a list that we can share. I don't know what exact format. We will let you know.
І ще запитання, чи вважаєте, що є якісь
And another
країни ЄС,
question,
які
do you think there are any
найбільш
countries in the EU
знаєте, під
that are
російські
the
наративи
most
попадають,
vulnerable
тобто
to
вони
Russian
більш
narratives?
схильні дослухатися до російських наративів?
They are more likely to listen to Russian narratives. I think quite a few.
Я думаю, немало таких країн.
I think there are quite a few countries, to be honest.
Східна Європа, там, де була присутність
Eastern Europe, where
Радянського Союзу за
the Soviet Union was present, and there are communities supporting Russian narratives, and I think Russia is helping. It's influencing this, just as we had it in Ukraine before the full-scale war, and we had people in parliament of Ukraine. What can you do? Yes, there is influence. A lot of money is spent on it, and yes, it happens in Europe too, and not only in Europe, Middle East. They spend billions in the Middle East and in Latin America, and in Africa, in the United States. They are everywhere.
Ліга Нет, будь ласка.
Доброго дня, Валерія Кондратова, Ліга.нет. Пане президенте, чи тримаєте ви на контролі
Mr. President,
розслідування історії
are
зі
you
сліжкою за командою
monitoring the
Чи відомо вам вже, хто
investigation
замовник? І якщо
into
вийде так, що
Bigus
керівник
info,
спецслужби
and
знав про цю спецоперацію, чи
who
будете ви
knew
його
about the
міняти?
special operation, and if this is somebody in the security services, are you going to replace him? I think I've already answered this question, maybe at my off the record meeting. Yeah, I already answered this at the off-rec. The leaders in the security service of Ukraine, leaders of a certain department, the disinformation department, whether they knew this or not, there is an internal investigation. This person has been replaced. And the head of security service, Maluk, said he would dismiss the whole department, and that is his affair. I don't care who was the organizer. This person has been removed, and then the leadership of the service will investigate.
Дуже дякую, пане президенте.
Mr. President, Kyiv Independent, we hear more and more from the Ukrainian military, especially near Bakhmut and Avdiivka, about the absence of well-prepared defense lines that should not only stop Russian advances, but also save their lives and destroy the enemy. What is happening? Will we see new, strong, strategic defense lines along the active front line? And who is in charge of that? The Commander-in-Chief and the Minister of Defense are in charge of this. And after the audit, we will see the weak points. As far as I know, in Kupiansk, in Khortytsa, this has been done very well. And this is a model for other directions. Romanian TV.
Thank you very much. Mr. President, next week.
Дякую, пане президенте. На наступному тижні
Mr. President, next week, the leaders of the so-called Transnistria in Moldova will be holding elections, and they want to become part of Russia. If this happens, what will Ukraine do? How will your country react? Are you prepared to offer military assistance to Moldova? There's a war on here. We are fighting against the Russian Federation. Moldova has not approached us with such requests. And number four, I am not certain that Transnistrians or whoever will do this next week. I am not certain of this. And that's my information. German TV, ART.
Доброго вечора, пане президент. АРД, німецьке телебачення. У нас є офіс
ARD. Mrs. von der Leyen
запропонувала посаду такого комісару з питань озброєнь.
has proposed an armament commissioner, a defense procurement commissioner. Is this an attempt from Europe to resist Russian threats? And given your desire to join the EU, what do you think of the time it's taken them to appoint somebody in charge of defense? We want to be part of the EU. This is our historic decision, our geopolitical decision, and the decision of our people, and nobody can change this course. Russia has tried, but it couldn't. As for bureaucracy in some institutions of the European Union or other alliances is a complex thing. There are new technologies, new approaches, and we all need to reset. 1 million of ammunition shells for Ukraine has been in discussion for a long time at various EU platforms, and we still have not received this million. I think we received about 30%. At the last meeting, Mr. Borrell said he would do everything he can to make sure we have this ammunition. We are not waiting for this bureaucracy. We are manufacturing our own. It's not enough. We have certain contracts, and we are counting on these volumes to arrive. Dear colleagues, we've been on air for an hour and a half, so another 10 minutes. Army TV and then BFM TV. Mr. President, Army TV here. You mentioned the mobilization bill and the prospects for its approval. We work a lot with the military, and your message that people need to rest because they are not made of steel, we can only confirm that because often people are tired. And can you tell us, in parallel, there are groups of people here in the rear who feel quite confident and are disrupting the mobilization process. These are various bloggers, lawyers who talk about the war being unlawful and that we need to change the status of martial law and we need to declare war. So given that this is one of the threats to national security, if mobilization were to be disrupted, what do you think about these people? How should we counter them? It's difficult. We need to counter them with modern technology. It's difficult to fight a hybrid war against Russian resources, and it's difficult when even some of our public fail to understand fully how this works, how Telegram works, how TikTok works, and how Russia is using these media. We need to show them the truth. We need to say how important it is for Ukraine to survive. People need to understand, and we have freedom of speech. People can say what they want. Although it is also important for those who have been on the front line to be able to speak too, because overwhelmingly it's different. And when this is heard on different platforms, other platforms, and a lot of money is invested by the Russians into YouTube, and it's difficult to fight this. You are one of these journalists who can help people receive true information and live in a clean or as clean as possible media environment, and it is important for us. For our part, we need to make steps to provide opportunities for our soldiers to rest, to be replaced, and so rotation is important. We need to bring it up, to put it in order. Our soldiers are having a hard time in some areas, on some directions. It is really difficult. We have mentioned this before. I think this is a different time. I'm not talking about morals, but more about money. When people rest and other people are in the trenches, we need to think how public that should be, because if you know that people are defending you and you are depriving them of rest, and what will happen if Russia seizes our state? We need to take various steps while there is an audit on, while Parliament is discussing what to do. Let's do something. So we had that mobilization bill had a provision decision to demobilize conscript, and we can release people who are on a fixed-term service contract. We can release them and send them home.
Так, BFM TV.
Thank you, Mr. President.
BFM.
Дякую, пане президенте. В мене також питання про мобілізацію.
I too have a question about mobilization. Do you think the reform that you mentioned,
Вона дозволить ця реформа
will
мобілізувати ще
this
додатково
reform
500
allow
тисяч
you to
військовослужбовців?
mobilize 500,000 soldiers additionally? And if not, are you prepared to increase? I'm not sure what's happening. I think you don't understand what's happening. There is mobilization
You have to check.
in Ukraine.
Great. Good. Мобілізація в Україні іде з перших
There is a
днів.
mobilization on in
воєнний
Ukraine. It has been on since the first day, and there is wartime mobilization. The changes into mobilization law that the military requested and the Ministry of Defense requested, there are various changes that they wanted. And these changes were to do with the issue that has not been resolved in mobilization. Certain detail, such as the detail of fixed-term servicemen, rotation, leave, how long one should serve for, how much training is required. So the parameters are being changed because mobilization law before the war, and believe me that you have the same law and other countries have the same law, but they have nothing to do with practice, with reality. They are overwhelmingly at odds with the realities of the war. So this isn't reform, these are additional provisions in the law that is in effect in Ukraine and would be in effect in any country in wartime. So if you need an audit in order to say how many changes you require, and if you need to know the numbers that you need to additionally mobilize, then you need to wait. And it is important to see how many people have not been to the front line after mobilization. And we need to put this in order.
Будь ласка, Fuji TV, Японія.
Fuji TV, Japan.
Дякую, пане президенте. Ми з японського телебачення.
We are from Japanese TV. There have been reports that Russians are using weapons from North Korea. How much does it concern you, and how can you stop this? Thank you. There has been reporting and there's been evidence that Russians have used artillery from North Korea and missiles and have been striking Ukraine, and there is evidence. But what can you do with that? There's nothing you can do. Help Ukraine. North Korea will continue to give weapons to Russia. I don't think they will give them more than what we know about, because we know the overall volume of artillery, and this is Soviet-made artillery. I think about 1.5 million. I think that's the overall number of artillery shells, ammunition. They have been used. That is a fact.
Давайте два останніх запитання. 24-й канал і далі литовське
Two
телебачення.
questions more, and that's
є
it.
позитивний один сигнал,
But
хочу колеги.
there is one positive here I want to tell my Japanese colleague. If Russia has to use Iranian Shaheds, North Korean artillery, it's Soviet-made artillery, if they have to resort to their missiles, this says that this year for them is also a watershed year. they too face a large deficit.
Пане президенте, вітаю. Україна підписала безпекові
Mr.
угоди з
President,
Британією,
Ukraine has
Францією,
signed
Італією,
security
Канадою,
agreements with
Данією.
Britain,
І кожна з
France,
цих країн
Italy, Canada, and
зобов'язана
Denmark,
підтримувати
and each
Україну,
of these
надавати
countries
військову
has
допомогу на
committed
10
itself to
років.
provide
Але жодна з цих
10
країн
years
не
of
готова
assistance,
вступати
military
на бік
assistance,
України
but
у війні,
none of these
якщо
countries
повторне
are
вторгнення
prepared to
відбудеться.
join
Скажіть, будь
Ukraine
ласка,
in
чи
a
ведеться
war if
питання
there
з
is
цього
a
приводу?
repeat
І
invasion.
нещодавно було інтерв'ю колишнього посла
And
України в
recently,
Великій Британії Пристайка, де він говорив, що
former
саме Лондон
Ambassador
розглядає
Pristayko
подібне
to
рішення, щоб
UK
відправити своїх солдатів до
has
України.
said in an interview that the UK is considering sending its soldiers to Ukraine.
Ми не ведемо перемовини з
We
нашими
are
партнерами
not
щодо застосування
negotiating with our
армії на
partners
території
on
України.
the use of their armies in Ukraine's
Якщо Україна
territory.
буде в НАТО,
If
для нас
Ukraine is a member of NATO,
найпотужніші безпекові
that
гарантії,
would be the
то
strongest
відповідно, я думаю,
security
що ми будемо
guarantee, and
використовувати п'яту поправку.
we will
Якщо
make
так
use of
станеться.
the
Хоча із досвіду, те, що ми бачимо,
fifth
жодна із
Article
країн,
5,
які в НАТО,
if
на жодну з
it
них
comes to that,
Росія
although
не
we have
нападає.
seen that Russia has not attacked any NATO country so far.
Посла складно, не бачив інтерв'ю.
I can't comment on the ambassador's comments. Maybe he knows something. I haven't seen the interview. If he knows that the British are here already, that's great.
Так, ЛТВ.
LTV.
Mr. President, Latvian public broadcaster is телебачення Комсомолинч.
Latvian TV.
Ми сьогодні вже зустрічаємося тут після другої річниці вторгнення
We are meeting here on the second anniversary of the Russian invasion, and is this the most difficult moment? If the pattern continues and Ukraine lacks in weapon deliveries,
Україна зустріне третю річницю. Тобто, що буде
what will be the situation in a year from now if this pattern continues, or on the contrary, if deliveries suddenly increase and will be sufficient, do you think the war will end this year before the next anniversary?
Дякую вам за запитання.
Thank you for your question.
Нам складно буде найближчі місяці, тому що є
We will have a difficult time in the next few months because there are hesitations in the United States and that has influence over certain countries. Although the European Union has shown its capability of leadership with support, and in March and April will be a difficult time for us. We will face various waves, political, financial, waves of pressure. Russia will prepare its counteroffensive in the beginning of summer. At the end of May, if they can, they will prepare for it. We will be prepared for their battle. Their battle that began on the 8th of October has so far been unproductive, I believe. For our part, we will prepare our own plan, and the watershed moments will be the US election, and it will give us the understanding of what will happen after that. I think we will be able to hold the first peace summit, and we will do our best to prepare a document for the entire world that could bring about an end to the war that has to end in a just peace for us and for everyone. What will this year look like at the end of the year, as you ask? That depends on a number of things. I will give you one example, if you don't mind. Air defense. If now in Ukraine or in the next few months, Ukraine, and that's just one example to help you understand how it works. If Ukraine could receive 10 Patriot
для
systems
ключових індустріальних
for
центрів України.
key industrial centers in Ukraine. I'm not saying which ones, that's
Якщо
clear.
ці системи ми могли
If
застосувати
these systems
ближче
can be
до
used
лінії фронту, вони б до нас
closer to the
не
front
підійшли.
line,
Відступ.
they
Ми б
would not
зламали їх лінії оборони.
advance.
І
We
пішли
would
б
break
вперед.
their defense lines and we would be
10
able
Patriot.
to advance ourselves.
Це б
Just
кардинально
10 Patriot
змінило би
systems would
ситуацію.
radically
Я кажу вам
change
просто,
the
Петріот, це не
situation.
значить, що тільки
I'm
система
saying
Patriot
Patriot,
вирішить.
I'm
Я вам
not saying
навів
that it's
один приклад.
that's the
І
only
таких
decisive weapon.
повірте
It's
мені,
just one
2-3,
example, and
і
believe
кінець
me,
їх обороні.
2 or
кінець.
3 such examples
тоді ви
would put an
зможете
end
відповісти
to their
собі на питання.
defense.
Так чому
And then you can
у
answer your own
України цього
question.
немає?
So why doesn't Ukraine have it?
Ну, значить, це не всім потрібно.
Maybe some people don't want it.
Значить, не все можливо.
Maybe not
Або,
everything is
значить, це
possible.
попереду.
Or maybe that's yet to happen.
І від цього залежить, який буде кінець
And
цього року.
this will decide what the end of the year looks like.
Колеги, будемо завершувати, але хочеться завершити на чомусь життєстверному. Чи є
Colleagues
запитання?
would like to end on a positive
До
note.
речі,
That
я
was
міг би
positive.
по-іншому відповісти. Це було
I
дуже
could have given a
позитивно.
different
Це
answer.
зрозуміло,
That was a
куди ми
very
йдемо,
positive
про
answer.
що ми
It is
говоримо
clear
з
where we're
партнерами,
heading,
на що ми
what we're
тиснемо,
talking
і
about
де
with
ми бачимо
partners,
себе в
what
кінці року.
we put pressure on, and
Тоді
where we
так,
see
на такій
ourselves at the end of the
позитивній
Це
year.
ноті.
кінець?
Так, тоді ми
Is this the
завершуємо.
end?
Ну, ладно.
Завершуємо.
Yes,
Дякую
in
вам.
that case.
До побачення.
Thank you very much. Goodbye.